talking about some challenges and opportunities in ERP adoption. And so to phrase it maybe a little bit differently, right? We don't want people to get implementation fatigue. Do you have some different ideas, things that you do going in ahead of the project in order to help make sure that you don't get to the style of project that Vlad and I both have described?
Yeah, look, there's, like I said, there's multiple dozen ways this thing can go off the rails if you're not careful, right? Like I was saying earlier, we need to be clear on why we're doing this in the first place. It could be because we want to mitigate our risk of running an old version. There's nothing wrong with that, but let's be deliberate about it. One of the other things that's changed over time is the way the software is implemented. Again, a decade ago, maybe more, 100% waterfall, right? So the scenario you were describing, the team goes away, magic happens, and it's like surprise and oh crap, it's wrong. You need to mitigate that. The way to do it is either a hybrid approach where you're having small deliverables or your agile scrum approach. But the reason that's important is you got to have small wins along the way. Even if you haven't gone live in small chunks, there's got to be small wins. So if you and I are in a workshop and we are figuring out how something should work, I owe it to you to show you that so that you can say, yes, and that to me has been a big change over how software is deployed. One of the common things, it doesn't happen as much, but one of the common things that I've seen in the past that cause things to go off the rails. And again, it's a function of how you implement and deploy. So if the three of us are in a workshop, we can all convince each other that the spec is good enough, right? Because we know, we've been there. But if you take that and you hand it to somebody that actually needs to configure something, they either are going to make an assumption or they're going to make a big mistake. That now goes to get tested, and this thing just snowballs, right? So that's why there's been this transition in how to implement. One of the other things that I'm seeing with customers is, look, it's great that you've got capabilities in whatever the ERP technology is. In some ways, that's become a commodity. And as a proof point, I would argue there's a lot of companies that are using offshore resources to do some of that work, right? Because it's a commodity. So then the question becomes, what's the high value work? And to me, the high value work, and this is where we pride ourselves in something we call active guidance. The high value work is being able to present options and to be able to guide you through that process. So it's important because it doesn't do a lot of good to give somebody the entire universe of options because they don't have the time and you're doing them a disservice. But I do think it's very valuable to say, these are your most probable outcomes. These are the pros and cons of each, and then actively guiding them through what would work and what wouldn't work for them. So that to me is critically important, and that's a tactical thing. What we have today, we've still got all the challenges we've had in the past, like the sponsorship and the change, etc. I think everybody's heard that stuff. I think one of the key differences, like I said, that we bring to the table, and if it's not us, I would urge you to challenge whoever your provider is, bring those things to the table. Sometimes they're called best practices. To me, best practice is kind of a moment in time. It may have been best yesterday. It might not be best today, and it probably won't be best tomorrow. The key is to be able to guide somebody through their universe of choices, pros and cons. Most customers, like I said, they're pretty smart and they know intuitively what the answer should be, but they need to be able to think through those things, and that's important. Just in that same vein, something else that happens sometimes that I'm super sensitive to because I've been burned by it and I've caused it, quite frankly, is if I'm asking you to make a decision and you're not crystal clear on the implication of your decision, it's unreasonable for me to force you into the decision, and you should not be making that decision. What does that mean? Years ago, I was working with technology where we were trying to model the plant in a hierarchy. What do you want this to look like? The person that I'm asking to make, they don't know, they don't care. They don't understand that, hey, I'm going to have to live with that decision. It's going to affect my reports. It's going to affect my ability to pull information out of the system. That's a really crappy thing to do to somebody. And you need to be aware that if you're making a decision, design decision, data strategy type decision, you need to understand what the implications are of that decision. So again, I am hypersensitive to that because I have inadvertently caused some of that pain in the past. So those are some of the high level things. Something else that happens that I cringe at, but I still see it sometimes. You've got an over enthusiastic leader that wants something delivered in 6 months. Pick your number. And it can't be done in 6 months. And we do this kind of auction with ourselves. If I can do that in 5, I can do it in 4.5. You're not doing anybody any favors. Being able to articulate and explain why there is risk in that. Look, they might still make the decision that, hey, we're going to jam this thing through in less time, but at least we're going in eyes wide open, right? That's another kind of thing that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's fairly common. It doesn't get called out in the top 2, 3, 5 things that cause implementations to go off the rails. But that's, again, something that I'm hypersensitive to. So how do you mitigate it? Talk to somebody who's done it before. And look, if you don't like the answer, then maybe we can solve it somehow with more resources, phase 2, whatever. But I think it's unfair for a senior person to pressure a technical resource to give them the right answer. So,
Ellis,